Council will come to order for the regular meeting, August 12th, 2024, 6 p.m. at the time and place is advertised. Our next order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd please stand and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Council and members of the public. Our next order of business is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the Council on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the Council. Citizens are encouraged to discuss operational issues in advance with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Also, if you're here to provide comments on any of our public hearings, you'll have to wait until the public hearing is open to do that. Lewiston City Council pledges to practice and promote civility within the governing body, advocating for civil engagement, respecting others and their viewpoints, and finding better solutions for the city of Lewiston. With that, I will open up if there are any citizen comments. There's a microphone in the back of the room. Please just introduce yourself, your city of residence. We don't need your physical address, and then remember to kind of get down on that microphone and kind of belt it out so we can hear and those listening at home can hear. Welcome.
My name is Marvin Duggar, and I live here in Lewiston Orchards, and I'm a member of a group called Citizens for the Preservation of Fish and Dams. And there's a serious issue going on right now. They want to tear out our dams, and we believe that it will be really devastating for our area. And I'll read you our see, there it is. Our mission is to provide educational and factual information regarding preservation of fish and dams, including but not limited to the 4 lower Snake River dams. It has been predicted by analysts that the Pacific Northwest will soon experience power shortages in the very near future, even with our 4 lower Snake River dams in place. We're asking, should we as citizens just stand by and let our dams be torn out without at least questioning why? We invite you to come to our Pacific Northwest Fish Symposium August 15th at Walla Walla Community College on Bridge Street in Clarkston from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. and let us show you how we can have both fish and dams. As things stand right now, it is totally possible that in the near future, on a 110 degree day, you will have no air conditioning, or on a below 0 day, you will have no heat. Think about it. You know, that is a definite, that's a possibility. And I mean, even with the dams in place, they're predicting shortages. So if they tear the dams out, we're going to have to replace that energy somewhere. That's going to cost money. It's going to cost big money. So we do not believe that that's the answer to our problem. See, the fish were literally 95% of the fish were wiped out before the dams were ever built. They had on the ocean and extensive harvesting. And we've built our dams, and they're trying to take out the 4 most fish-friendly dams that we have. I mean, it's almost 99% of the salmon go over these dams, and 90 or 95% at least, and 99% of the smolts go down. Okay, well, we have Grand Coulee Dam, Chief Joseph Dam, which take up hundreds of miles which close off hundreds of miles of spawning area. They have no fish bypass at all. We have Dvorak Dam, the Hills Canyon dams that cut off literally
Thank you,
Thousands.
Marvin. It's been 3 minutes. I have
Okay.
to cut you off there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then you're putting some information in the back.
Yes, I
Table.
have the materials back here if anybody's interested. We're having
Okay.
a symposium. And we have the materials here, and so I welcome everybody to come back and get them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marvin. Thanks for being here. Are there further citizen comments tonight? Person, okay. I don't see any. Clerk Brockby informed me that we did receive some citizen comments that were emailed to her, and she has since forwarded them to each of the council members regarding the shipping containers. So if you'd like, you can read those in your inbox. Otherwise, if there are no further comments, then we will move on to the active agenda. Item A, change order number 1, wastewater improvement project WW060IFB-24-001, considering approving change order number 1 for the wastewater improvement project WW060 in the total amount of $1,850,481.50 and authorizing the mayor to execute the change order. This is an action item. We have our Public Works Director with us here tonight. Director Johnson, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. I'm going to kind of take a long walk with you here tonight to kind of walk through the process of what this change order is about. Typically, as the city and Public Works, we don't like change orders, but this change order is an opportunity. So if you recall back in March 25th, the City Council awarded a contract for some sewer line replacement for a total amount of $3.3 million and change. Upon going through the permitting and getting the project going, we found that we were not going to get the necessary approvals from the Army Corps of Engineers to work within the property that they own. So we were going to have to pull back that segment. So that is a reduction of $254,267. In conversations with the contractor, they said they would honor their unit prices that they bid the previous work that we've already awarded them with. And so we negotiated with them to do 3 additional basins, Basin 7A, Basin 6A, and Basin 6E. So that's why you see the increase for the increased work of $2.1 million for that net difference of $1.85 million increase. The reason we selected those basins are we just go down, these basins are numbered. And we're down, the basins 1, 2, 3, 4 are already completed. So now we're working our way. And so we will go back to this other segment that we need the permission approval from the Corps at a later date, but we don't see that. This is not a significant change. In fact, we're moving up. This is a good price that we're getting. And so we will be ahead of the budget monetarily on the long term. The only issue would be that we need to amend the FY24 budget to approve this work that we're asking to approve with this change order. There was a deduction in days of construction with reduction of the previous segment that the Army Corps needed to approve on. So that's 10 days under. The additional 3 segments would require another 100 days. So you're now net increase 90 days. 100 minus 10 is 90 days. So this will be a longer project with additional funds. The funds are available. We just need to authorize the budget amendment for this year. But this has already been built into the wastewater utility rates. So that was a lot of words. I tried to jam that in. I know it's a long evening, so I stand here for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Director. Council? Councilor Lidke?
Just walk me through again. So we're going to bypass part of it that went into the core property.
Yeah, that's it's not yes, that was a segment that was identified. We don't really have a capacity concern right now. Snake River Road is going to go over that. So that's for construction next year. So we will not get that done before Snake River Road is done. So that is a negative, but we don't have a choice. We have to move forward with funding for the road, and we can't get the permit from the Corps till next year.
So we are pursuing the permit for
Yes,
next year.
the permit, if everything lines up, we will be able to get the permit in front of the road project, and we will maybe try and slide that one in because that's not, 254,000 is not a large sewer project. So we may even include it with the road project if the stars align, but I'm not going to make any promises.
Probably a good idea. Thank you.
Further questions, council? Councilor Klein?
I'm just curious where the sewer basins, are those located at the wastewater treatment plant?
What's that?
Are the sewer basins going to be located at the wastewater treatment plant?
No, these are the pipes within the ground
Okay.
that deliver it to the plant. And I don't know exactly where these new basins are. So these are, we call them basins, but they're basically pipes that are underground that transmit the wastewater to the plant. And so we go through and we rate them all. And as they're due for replacement, we go out there and replace them. And this technology that we use is called trenchless. And so they don't dig up the whole line, which is a newer technology, which saves a significant amount of money. So they basically pull a plastic tube through it and slip line them.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, for a motion,
Councilor Lidkey?
I would move to approve change order number 1 for wastewater improvement project WW060 between Titan Technologies, Inc. and the city of Lewiston, and authorizing the mayor to execute the change order.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Lidkey, seconded by Councilor Schroeder to approve change order number 1 for wastewater improvement project WW060 between Titan Technologies, Inc. and the city of Lewiston, authorizing the mayor to execute the change order. Councilor Lidkey, would you like to express your motion? You don't have to.
I'm glad we're moving forward with projects. Let's just hope we can get the whole thing done.
Thank you, councilors. Further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk Brocky?
Council President Kleberg,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Lidkey,
Aye.
Councilor Klein, Councilor Spiegelmeier.
Aye. Thank you, councilors. Thank you, Clerk Brocky. Thank you, Director Johnson. Next, we'll move to item B, Resolution 2024-35, considering declaring various items of City of Lewiston property to be surplus and providing for the public auction of said surplus property. This is an action item. Councilors, if you have any questions, Director Gordon is here. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. Councilor Klein?
I was wondering about the mower that's getting auctioned off. You don't want to keep that as a spare?
No, we have replaced that mower. So this year we received in 2 mowers. And so this one's no longer being used.
Okay. I know in the past there'd been issues with it breaking down and we didn't have a mower to use in the meantime, so.
Yeah, and I apologize because I can't recall the brand and the specific size of mowers we purchased this year and if they would be compatible. But our services manager does do a thorough job of assessing what we can retain for replacement parts and then when they're no longer of value to us. So they don't go on this list until we've deemed that we can't obtain any future value off the items.
And Director, would you introduce yourself for the record, please?
I apologize. Amy Gordon, Finance Director.
Council, further questions? No?
Mayor,
Councilor Schroeder?
I move to approve Resolution 2024-35.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Forsman to approve Resolution 2024-35. Is there discussion? Clerk Brocky?
Council President Kleberg,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Lidkey,
Aye.
Councilor Klein,
Aye.
Councilor Spiegelmeier.
Aye. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Director. Resolution item C, active agenda item 4C, Resolution 2024-37, considering declaring certain vehicles in the possession of the Lewiston Police Department as surplus and authorizing sale of said vehicles by auction pursuant to Idaho Code 37-2744E2. This is an action item, and we have our Finance Director here with us tonight, and I asked if she could just give you a quick overview of what this is all about, Council. Director Gordon?
Thank you, Mayor. Amy Gordon, City Finance Director. I did want to share some comments on this one because we don't do these very often. when we do an arrest, a narcotics arrest, a lot of times they'll seize property during those arrests. And then once the case has gone through the court systems, the court may then determine that that property be seized and turned back to the law enforcement agency who participated in that arrest. So these are vehicles that the courts have determined have become seized property. They release them to the city to sell through a surplus auction. I believe the county gets a portion of these as well. They'll get a percentage off of these sales. We'll get a percentage. And then the funds that we obtain through the surplus auction, there's specific requirements on how that money can be used. It can only be used towards future narcotics investigations. So it goes into a special reserve within the general fund that then provides an investigation budget for the police department. We've used the money in the past. Our former K-9 officer, Marta, was purchased from those funds. So those are some of the items that we've been able to utilize the funds for.
Thank you, Director. Council, Councilor Schroeder.
I move to approve Resolution 2024-37.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Forsman to approve Resolution 2024-37. Clerk Rocky.
Council President Kleber,
Aye.
Counselor Schroeder,
Aye.
Counselor Forsman,
Aye.
Counselor Lidke,
Aye.
Counselor Klein. Aye. Counselor Spiegelmeier.
Aye. Next, we move to active agenda item D, ad hoc subcommittee comprehensive plan. Considering the creation of an ad hoc committee of the City Council to make recommendations on the implementation of the comprehensive plan to include members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is an action item. Our city planner, Joel Plascon, is here. Council, if you have questions, otherwise I would entertain a motion on this.
Mayor,
Councilor Schroeder.
I move to create I make a motion to create an ad hoc committee of the City Council to make recommendations on the implementation of the comprehensive plan and to include members of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Councilor Forsman to create an ad hoc committee of the council to make recommendations on the implementation of the comprehensive plan and to include members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. Clerk Rocky.
Council President Kleber,
Aye.
Counselor Schroeder,
Aye.
Counselor Forsman,
Aye.
Counselor Lidke,
Aye.
Counselor Klein. Aye. Counselor Spiegelmeier.
Aye. Thank you, council. Motion passes. Next, we move to ordinances. Item E, first reading, number 1A, ordinance 4922, considering amending Lewiston City Code Section 21-1D to add additional exemptions, Section 21-2 to add additional definitions, and Section 21-23 regarding event vendor licensing requirements. This is an action item. Our city planner, Joel Plascon, is here. If you have questions, answers, otherwise I would entertain a motion.
Mayor,
Councilor Schroeder.
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4922.
Second. Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Council President Kleberg to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4922. Is there discussion? Amendments? Council, if not, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Clerk Rocky.
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4922, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending Section 21-1D of Lewiston City Code to add additional exemptions, amending Section 21-2 of Lewiston City Code to add additional definitions, amending Section 21-73 of Lewiston City Code regarding event vendor licensing requirements and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Clerk Rocky. Council, next up, we have item F, Lewiston Wastewater Treatment Plant Waterline Extension, CE&I Amendment, considering approving an amendment with Keller Associates Incorporated in the amount of $99,500 for construction, engineering, and inspection, CE&I of Lewiston Wastewater Treatment Plant Waterline Extension, and authorizing the mayor to execute the contract amendment. This is an action item. Director Johnson is here. Director, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. As was outlined, this is the construction inspection and engineering contract for Keller and Associates, who did the original design for this water line. You have previously approved the contract for the construction of this water line at your July 22nd meeting. So typically we like to have these together. We ran into some paperwork contract issues with the consultant on this, and so now we're coming back at a later date now to just get this contract executed so we can get the project going this week. Stand for any questions.
Thank you, Director. Councilors, Council Lidke?
So this is not a change order, but we weren't informed of this cost in the previous.
This is an amendment to the original design contract. And you are correct. The mayor has been putting pressure on staff to, when we lay out the costs of a project, to include design, construction, and then this CE&I. And I don't believe that this was included in that last approval. So we apologize and we need to do better on that.
Director, I have to ask a question. Do I understand this project correctly, that we had staff working on this that got pulled away and put on a different project, and that's why we're asking for some help here?
Yeah, so I mean, the longer story is we don't always approve these. We don't approve these with the design contracts in the front end, because then it obligates us for that in the contract. So we leave this as a future amendment in the scenario where we have staff available. We don't have staff available for the window of the construction of this, and so then we pull them in for this amendment. It's trying to walk that tightrope of, you don't want to have staff that's not busy, and you also don't want to send out and basically farm out all of your engineering work. And so you'll see these contracts for larger projects frequently that we just don't have the staff that either have the expertise, or we just don't have the staff available, period, to go out and do this. This is a water line. It's not the most complicated, but it's in our busy season right now.
Councilor Schroeder?
I move to approve the First Amendment to the professional service agreement between Keller Associates, Inc. and the City of Lewiston, and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement.
Second. Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Councilor Spickelmeyer, to approve the First Amendment to the Professional Services Agreement between Keller Associates, Inc. and the City of Lewiston, and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement. Is there further discussion? Clerk Brockie?
President Kleber,
Aye.
Counselor Schroeder,
Aye.
Counselor Forsman,
Aye.
Counselor Lidke,
Aye.
Counselor Klein,
Aye.
Counselor Spickelmeyer.
Aye. Thank you, councilors. Motion carries. Thank you, Director Johnson, Clerk Brockie. Next, we move to Roman numeral 5, public hearings and related action items. Item A, public hearing ZA-01-24, accepting testimony on zoning code amendment ZA-01-24 to remove from Chapter 37 of Lewiston City Code various provisions throughout zoning districts that are under the authority of the Public Works Department, such as, but not limited to, requirements for the installation of street improvements and dedication of street right-of-way. This is an action item. Our city planner, Joel Plaskon, is with us here tonight. This will work this way. I will open up the public hearing. We will have a staff presentation. We'll accept testimony from the public. You'll have 3 minutes to present your thoughts. Councilors, if you have questions of staff or anyone providing testimony, that would be your time to ask. There will be no additional testimony received once the public hearing is closed. So again, this is the time that you can ask questions. After that, I will close the public hearing. So with that, I will open the public hearing and turn the floor over to our city planner, Joel Plaskon. Joel, welcome. If you'd please introduce yourself for the record. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Joel Plaskon, Lewiston City Planner. So as described in the agenda item title, the zoning code currently contains requirements of the Public Works Department. The zoning code is administered primarily at the staff level by the Community Development Department, and in the rare instances of appeals of our administration, authority is pushed up to the Planning and Zoning Commission. But neither the Community Development Department nor the Planning and Zoning Commission have any authority or control over public works requirements or the ability to amend those, most appropriately interpret them. So it's caused a little bit of confusion. And so we're proposing that those requirements of public works be removed from the zoning code. They would still be in place in other formats. The Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing on this. They received no public testimony. The Public Works Department has agreed to this, and Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended that City Council approve these amendments. The details on these amendment proposals are shown in the ordinance that's in your packets in strikeout underlined version, if you wanted to see the details. That's it.
Thank you, Joel. We'll see if there's any testimony from the public. I don't see any. Councilors, any questions from Mr. Plascon before I close the public hearing? Questions? So with that, I will close the public hearing. Councilors, next we'll move to item B. First reading of ordinance 4920 concerning amending Lewiston City Code sections 37-61, 37-66, 37-69.2, 37-73, 37-79, and 37-83 to remove references to development standards for sidewalks, section 37-93.5 to remove dedication of right-of-way, section 37-93.6 to remove the requirement that stormwater controls be incorporated in landscape buffers and statements for anticipated traffic generation, and section 37-93.8 to add the city engineer as administrator and remove sidewalk standards. This is an action item.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Lidke,
I'd move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4920.
Second.
been moved by Councilor Lidke, seconded by Councilor Schroeder to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4920. Is there further discussion? Amendments, if any, Council? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Clerk Rocky.
Approving the first reading of ordinance number 4920, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston amending sections 37-61, 37-66, 37-69.2, 37-73, 37-79, and 37-83 of the Lewiston City Code to remove references to development standards for sidewalks, amending section 37-93.5 of the Lewiston City Code to remove dedication of right-of-way, amending section 37-93.6 of the Lewiston City Code to remove the requirement that stormwater controls be incorporated into landscape buffers and statements of anticipated traffic generation, amending section 37-93.8 to add the city engineer as administrator and remove sidewalk standards, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Clerk Rocky. Councilors, next we're moved. Roman numeral 5, public hearings and related action items. Number D, first reading ordinance 4921, considering repealing and reserving sections 37-129 of the Lewiston City Code. Did I jump over one? I did.
Yes.
Thank you, councilors. I sure did. So I'm going to recant everything I just said. Go back to item C, public hearing ZA-02-24, accepting testimony on zoning code amendment ZA-02-24 to remove the prohibition against the use of shipping containers as buildings on residential and commercial properties, and to amend the definition of building to include shipping containers in Chapter 37 of Lewiston City Code. This is an action item. Again, we have our city planner, Joel Plascon, with us tonight. I will open the public hearing. After that, we'll have a staff presentation from Mr. Plascon. We'll receive testimony from the public. If there is any, councilors, you have an opportunity to ask questions. Once the hearing is closed, you'll no longer be able to ask those questions, and then I will close the hearing. So with that, council, I will open the public hearing and turn the floor over to our city planner, Mr. Joel Plascon, for a brief presentation. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So this is a matter that was brought to City Council at your June 3rd work session, where staff had brought to your attention the fact that the zoning code prohibits the use of shipping containers as accessory buildings and as buildings in all but the port, the airport, and the industrial zoning districts. However, homeowners and business owners in commercial zoning districts have installed them on their properties throughout the city, and numbering, we estimate, in the hundreds. So they're all out there illegally. Council, after being introduced to this information at your June 3rd work session, asked staff, or actually you initiated the zoning code amendment to remove the prohibition of these shipping containers from the zoning code so that they could be allowed and they could be regulated by the zoning code in terms of setbacks from property lines, maximum allowable lot coverage, building height, and those that would qualify would require permits. So staff then scheduled a public hearing as required by Idaho Code in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Planning and Zoning Commission conducted a public hearing on the matter and recommended that City Council approve it. And so now here we are at the City Council public hearing for your consideration of the code amendment formally. The associated ordinance is 4921, and it's your next agenda item after this.
Thank you, Joel. Let's see if there's anyone here from the public that would like to present testimony. If you'd like to present testimony, please walk up to the microphone, introduce yourself for the record, your name and city of residence, and we'll give you 3 minutes to share your concerns with us. So welcome, anyone.
Bill Firstanaw, 1011 Prospect. This is disturbing. It's doublespeak. We're saying we don't want to enforce the code, but now we're going to change the code, and then we're going to enforce these new things that we brought in, but we haven't enforced it for who knows how long. If this junk is laying around town and it's not supposed to be, then enforce the code. Don't vote for this scam. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else from the public that would like to provide testimony? Council, do you have any questions of Mr. Firstanow or Mr. Plascon? Councilor Lidkey?
My questions are for Mr. Plascon. Thanks, Joel. My first question is, how did we get to the estimate of hundreds?
Would defer to our code enforcement officer.
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Defer to our code enforcement officer.
Dave, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record. The floor is yours. Remember to speak up loudly, clearly, so those listening at home can hear us too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Dave Goby, I'm the Community Resource Officer assigned to Community Development as the basically the Code Enforcement Officer. When this all came to light several months ago through a discussion, it was determined for me to go around town to try to figure out how many of these units approximately there were and what zones they were in. And what I found is that there's, just by driving around town without looking really, really hard, I easily came up with close to 200 of these units in all the various zones.
Follow-up.
Counselor?
Thank you, and I'm sure that was a fun endeavor. Now my question is how many are going to be legal and how many are going to be illegal by what's being proposed?
I'm not qualified to discuss that or to give that information because I don't know. It just depends on the zone and what the building codes are. What I can tell you is that most of the ones that I observed in residential areas are under the 200 square foot range, which means that those would not require permits unless, I believe, if they have electricity or any type of plumbing attached to them. And the only thing that they would be required to have would be the setbacks.
Follow up,
Counselor?
and this is probably not for you, but maybe for community development. Are we going to go around and measure setbacks? Are we going to base it off of complaints? I think the public's concern is that it has been left to complaints, but yet we have not enforced it. So can we give them a plan for moving forward?
Shannon Grove, Community Development Director, City of Lewiston. So Dave is fairly new to this position. Code enforcement was brought into community development about November of last year. And since that time, previously, a lot of code enforcement cases, the majority of them, I would say, were complaint-based driven. Today, code enforcement looks a little bit different. We are more proactive about going after, specifically right now in this season, weeds. So how it usually would work, and Dave, please step in if I'm misspeaking, but it can still be complaint-based. Somebody could call and say, hey, I think this is in the setback, or I'm trying to drive down my alley, but there is a storage container and I can't see around it. Think it's in the site triangle. So each zone has its own setbacks. And so that's why Dave can't answer that question right now, because it's hard to say. So when weed season is over, oftentimes we're saying, okay, what are the next ones? Sometimes it's parking, sometimes it's storage containers. And so I don't want to say that it's going to be 100% complaint based, but I also don't want to say that it's going to be, we're going to make a huge effort and go measure each and every one of these. As you know, property lines where they appear to be with the grass are not exactly where they actually are. And so oftentimes you have to do a lot of research looking at GIS, seeing where the property line is, doing the measurement.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Well, for the director, and I guess my concern is that about the permits that were required. I'm wondering if we could expect the sellers of these storage units to inform the buyers of permit requirements. Obviously, nothing was put forward before on the ordinance that you couldn't have them. So how should we expect them to actually go and get a permit to put one in?
Sure.
I mean, any thought on that?
Sometimes it's based on what we're doing anyway. We'll see them out there. Certainly we can notify folks after the first, second, and third readings go through. We already have put together some informational items. And like Dave said, the majority of the ones that are existing are under 200 square feet. Anything under 200 square feet does not require a building permit, but it would require not to be in the setbacks or the site triangles.
Follow up.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
So 200 square feet, does that be like a 20-footer?
20 by 10?
Huh?
Yeah. So like I said, the majority of these would be under that.
I think the 20 footers are generally 8 foot wide, 20 feet long.
And when Dave initially went and looked at kind of on the search for these storage containers, there was one that he thought was a storage container, but on a closer inspection, it was actually a shed that looked very much like a storage container. So, you know, the materials looked very similar to that of a storage container.
Thank you.
So, yeah, on the question of permitting, there are a lot of factors that are involved. They're listed on the sheet of paper that I left at each of your seats prior to the start of the meeting. That's information that's now on our website that we put out there in an effort to get the information out there ahead of the game. So that list is basically what the criteria are. The two biggest ones are the square footage cutoffs. So in residential zones, permits are not required for anything 200 square feet or less. I venture to say that that is the vast majority of the ones in the residential zones would be exempt from permitting. However, on the commercial side, the square footage maximum allowance prior to permit requirement is 120. And I would also venture to say that in that case, the vast majority of the one on commercial properties would require permits because they do exceed 120 square feet in most instances on the commercial side.
Counselor Spicklemeyer?
And then follow up to that then, so this is for permanent, but for a construction job site, these rules don't apply.
Correct.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
what, do we have a expected, or what we plan to charge for permits, for permitting?
So these units would be treated, if this ordinance passes, just like buildings. And the determination of building permit fees is determined by the building code, and it's based on the valuation of the work or the valuation of the job and the materials. So it's specific to that. So I haven't done estimates on what the majority of those would be, but they would be treated, the permit fees would be the same as if for any other building.
Counselor Lidke?
Can you give us the range of those just typical building permit value for something of that, a 20 by 10?
I cannot. I do not work on the permit side.
Council President Kleberg?
So we've already discussed the average size of these, and actually haven't been somebody that rented these in the past. They're pretty much 8 by 20s. It's 160 square feet. And I mean, I would hate to see that we get to the point where we're going to charge somebody, you know, 150, 200 bucks to put a metal can outside their house where they've got room to store their stuff. This is crazy.
Council certainly has the ability to direct fees to the Community Development Department. And so if you wanted to exclude storage containers from permit fees, you could do that. Otherwise, we treat them like any other building permit. Somebody would be putting a large shed, and if it's over 200 square feet, then it does require a permit.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
I was trying to go through the code again. Do we have anything on the amount of storage units that they can have on one single property, or was that just down to the size and?
That comes down to lot coverage oftentimes, and setbacks from each other. So it depends.
Yeah, okay. That's what I thought I remembered. Thank you.
I'd like to ask our Community Resource Officer, Mr. Goby, a quick question, because I need to understand this too, because I'm getting the phone calls and I'll get more. Director Grohl mentioned about safety, site triangles and so forth. So today, if we have these types of buildings within the site triangle, or it presents a safety hazard or risk, what is our action today?
We do have the ability to have people remove items from the site triangle where a street intersects with another street. That's already in code. So if somebody was to erect or place an object, it doesn't define what kind of an object, but if somebody placed an object or vegetation in site triangle, city code does have a provision for us to require them to remove them.
Thank you. Council, further questions? Okay, council, with that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Now we will move to item D, first reading of ordinance 4921, considering repealing and reserving sections 37-129 of the Lewiston City Code related to the use of prefabricated, containerized transport units as accessory buildings or storage units. and amending section 37-3 to amend the definition of building to include shipping containers. This is an action item, and counselors, let me just point out to you again, this is the first reading, so you'll have 2 more opportunities beyond tonight.
Mayor,
Counselor Schroeder,
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4921.
I'll second.
been moved by Counselor Schroeder, seconded by Council President Kleber to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4921. Is there discussion? Counselor Lidkey?
I feel as though I should really probably not even participated in the public hearing and should abstain because my current employer, which I act as chief executive officer of, would be affected by this as we have 2 containers permanently on our property and have had for some time. So I don't want to be in the decision-making process of how much I have to pay the city or not pay or have them removed.
Counselor Kleber?
Just real quick, let's touch on Councilor Lickey's comment. So we have 2 containers? We've got like 8.
We're in Clarkston.
I know, we're in Clarkston.
I'll move mine over to you, Robert.
Mayor?
Counselor Schroeder?
Thank you. I do not think they're beautiful, but then they need to be regulated. People use them for storage and however appropriately that is. But if we don't regulate them, then it is going to be an absolute nightmare eventually. But by regulating them, we're going to have guidelines. They're going to see that they have to use a setbacks like any other building they put on their property. And they don't have to put beautiful buildings on their property. That's not a requirement. So I do not like them in our city, but I see the need for them and I see that it needs to be regulated.
Mayor.
Counselor Forsman?
For me, just saying a flat no, you are not allowed to have any type of shipping containers. That applies to anybody. We're not going to give you any kind of leeway. Is not allowing the homeowner to do what they pay to their property taxes, their mortgage, to be able to treat their property as they see fit. And so they should have the right to put a shipping container if they needed to find some way to storage. I don't know if they have an excess amount of stuff that they want to have neatly put away versus just laying out in their yard, which I would much rather see than that. And if we can regulate it, then there could be situations where if it is being abused, we have the code to be able to do that. I don't see the point in the permit cost unless they were adding plumbing or electricity. Just to put a building that doesn't have any other accessibilities to it doesn't seem valuable. So I would like to see that we remove the permit fee with this code. But I am in agreement that we need to have some kind of code and some leeway for homeowners to be able to have a voice in their, what should they want to do with their properties.
Council, for the comments, Counselor Speckelmeyer?
I have a question on this motion. The motion does not include these proposed changes, correct?
It does not, Counselor. It includes what you currently have before you. However, you could offer an amendment and change that, or when we bring it up for a second reading, and a third reading, should the council choose to divide that into a second and third reading instead of combining those 2, you would have at least 2 more opportunities to make amendments to this ordinance. Counselor Klein?
I fully agree that people should be able to do what they want with their property. They pay taxes. I don't agree with the restriction on size. I think that should not be part of it at all. Because somebody could have a big piece of property and totally put a 40-foot storage container on their property. As far as permitting, it makes sense if someone is living in it, or they're basically turning it into a house. It should be like as if you're building a house, as far as permitting goes.
Thank you, Counselor. Further comments, questions, amendments? If not, those in favor, excuse me,
Amendments?
Counselor Forsman?
I'd like to make an amendment to remove the permit fee on shipping containers, but keep the restriction based on the person's property and allowed size and how many.
It doesn't. So I'm going to pull the ordinance back up. Can you point to a line on it?
I can hold back till the next one, the next reading, if you like to clear up that amendment.
You're going to withdraw your amendment?
I can withdraw my amendment. I'll work, make sure I get it cleaner next time.
That would probably be a little bit cleaner. Thank you, Counselor.
Yes.
Okay, Counselor, with that, let me make sure I get everything put together here. Yeah. All right, those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Excuse me, Mayor. What are we actually voting on now?
It's your motion, Counselor, to approve the first
Okay.
reading of ordinance number 4921.
There's no amendments or anything. Okay, thank you. Then, yes, aye.
Those, one more time, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Okay.
Okay, motion carries. Clerk Rocky?
Approving the first reading of ordinance number 4921, an ordinance of the City of Lewiston repealing and reserving Section 37-129 of the Lewiston City Code related to the use of prefabricated containerized transport units as accessory buildings or storage units, and amending Section 37-3 to amend the definition of building to include shipping containers and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Council. Next up, we move. We're in Roman number 5, public hearings and related action items. We will now move to item E, public hearing fiscal year 2024 budget amendments, accepting testimony on a proposed amendment to the fiscal year 2024 budget to receive unanticipated revenues received during the fiscal year and authorizing their expenditures. This is an action item, and we have with us our Finance Director, Amy Gordon. Amy, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Amy Gordon, City Finance Director. First up tonight, we have the public hearing on the budget amendments to our current year budget. The budget we are currently operating in, it's our fiscal year 2024 budget. I thought we'd do things a little bit different this year and spend a little bit more time on the budget amendments. And walk through them this year. And if council hasn't already, well, actually, let me take a step back here. I want to walk over through the process. Tonight, August 12th, we're going to have our public hearing on the budget amendments, the first reading of the related ordinance to that, and then we'll do a public hearing on the 2025 proposed budget, and then the first reading of the ordinances related to the 2025 budget. Next week, we have a special meeting. We do this special meeting each year in between the 2 August regular meetings of council. This year, we've reserved that special meeting to be specific to budget. So I'll do with the public hearings this week. You're welcome to ask questions and dive into the budget deeper this week if you want. But next week, we have that entire meeting reserved so council can really ask a lot of questions, seek that information, work through amendments should you choose. My goal is to give you as much time to work through that exercise and to get all your questions answered so that when we come back on the the regular meeting on August 26th, we can have amended ordinances, should you choose to amend them, that are ready to adopt.
So
with-
with that, Director Gordon, you did a wonderful job of introducing the subject. I do have to open the public hearing, have a staff presentation, and then accept any testimony from the public that may be here tonight. Council, you'll have an opportunity to ask your questions, and then we'll close the public hearing. So with that, I will open the public hearing and turn it over to Director Gordon. Thank you.
So with the amendment process, so there's a few reasons why we amend the budget. One of the most common reasons is just a timing issue. The item was approved in the prior budget year, but because of timing issues, delivery, project timelines, it couldn't be completed in that year. So we're carrying it forward into the next year, which is our current year. If we come into receipt of new revenue that was unplanned, unknown at the time we drafted the budget and adopted it, this gives us the opportunity to spend those monies. And then throughout the year, council might make decisions or take action on unplanned items, and then amend the budget to include those items. So on the first slide here is within the general fund. I do want to point out, when we write the ordinance for these, we try to be really strategic in how we list the revenue and then the expenses below, so that you can match them up as you're reading down through the revenue. You can match them to the expenses as you read down on the page. So what I've done is I've just taken a snippet of the revenue and then married it with the corresponding expenditure. So general fund, there are two amendments this year to utilize reserves. One is for the United Airlines contract that council approved earlier this year. And then the other one is in relation to a memo you received from the city attorney earlier this summer on additional legal expenses that would be needed for some ongoing litigation. This item up there is to accept a donation that was made to the Recreation Department to purchase a new movie screen and projector for the movies in the park. Police, they have a few amendments this year. One that was to carry forward some software that they purchased last year, but did not have receipt of or implemented. And so the purchase of that carried into the current year. They also were able to obtain some grants. There's a federal grant for Motorola consulates. You'll see that on both the police amendment and fire amendments. So that's equipment that was received through emergency management. So these are interesting because we don't actually receive money and then go out and buy the equipment. We receive the equipment through emergency management, but we do need to record that as if we had received the money and then gone and made the purchase, so that we're fully transparent, showing that revenue and expenditure. The police department also received a grant for their new canine. And then they received a donation from a law enforcement agency in Southern Idaho to provide the kennel for that canine officer. Fire, they had also received a grant. They had some carrier forward purchase orders. And then likewise, they were also a recipient of consulates through that emergency management grant. Our capital fund, the very first one listed there, this is one that always requires some explanation each year, is airport improvements. The city of Lewiston, we did not receive this money and we did not spend the money, but we are a co-owner of the airport. So that is, the airport's an asset of the city. We have an outside entity that manages the airport. They receive the revenue, they make the improvements, but as they're improving our asset, we have to record that value in our financial statements. So this is an entry we make every year to our book to capture that improved value to the asset. We reach out to the airport every year to get an idea of what they believe their total capital investments will be for the year. And then we amend our budget for 50% of those improvements. The county likewise does a similar entry on their books. Earlier this year, Director Barker with Parks and Recreation had brought to you an item to approve grant funding that would make some improvements up at Pioneer Park in regards to ADA, some ADA accessibility, as well as, I believe, some playground equipment. This would allow them to then spend those funds on that project. I believe that project is currently in the bid process. The pickleball court project carried into this year as well. It was in last year's budget, but some of that project carried into this year. This would amend the budget for the portion that was paid for and contributed by the Pickleball Association. And then the last one on there, highlighted in green, was an item that came before council earlier this year where you approved the SLA related to the Burl Sidewalk Infill project. So that, as you can see from up above, is primarily funded through grants. Workers' compensation, I sound like a broken record on this because I brought it up at each of my quarterly financial reports just so it was in front of council and they would be expecting this. We just continue to have really high claim costs related to our workers' compensation claims. This would amend the budget to allow us to be able to continue paying claims through the end of the year. I will add that we have a really high claim that has hit the stop loss limit. So the way that works is the city still continues to pay the claim costs associated to that claim, but what will happen now is we will receive reimbursement through that stop loss coverage. So we still have to pay the claims, we still have to have the appropriations to be able to pay the claims, but what will be different on that particular claim is rather than it coming out of our workers' compensation reserves, we will be receiving reimbursement revenue from the insurance carrier at this point going forward. I think we hit that threshold just a short while ago, midsummer. Water fund, all the amendments listed here for water fund are all carry forward items. The one that says WTP construction, that is to finish out the bond funded portion of the water plant. When we wrote the 24 budget, we had thought that they would be done with that construction and that we would have spent all the bond funds, but some of that carried over into fiscal year 24. So that's that big amendment there, is we still had about $1.8 million left to receive from the bond proceeds and to spend on the construction of the plant. The bottom project there, that ITD water line, they had thought that project would get started in 23. The budget was in 23. In fact, I think you guys amended the 23 budget to get it in there. And then the project carried into 24. Wastewater fund, this is what Dustin was just up here talking to you about. You approved the original contract back in March, and just earlier this evening, you approved the amendment to that contract. This amendment will cover the full cost of that contract now. This gives them the ability to award the contract as amended. Transportation fund, this is one that I think we should talk about because we have had several instances where we've had uninsured or underinsured motorists hit signal component boxes, traffic poles, traffic lights. And unfortunately, when that happens, we have to replace those items. We do bill the motorist in those incidents. That's why the revenue source is a reimbursement. We send them an invoice. And we do everything within our ability to collect on those invoices. If it's associated to a criminal case, we work with the prosecutors and try to get that money reimbursed through a restitution agreement. We work and try to get what we can through their insurance companies, but sometimes they either don't have the insurance or they're carrying the minimum liability, which unfortunately in the state of Idaho is only $15,000. So we will continue to pursue collecting on these items, but I do need to make it clear that we can't guarantee we'll be able to collect on them, but we put every effort into them. This, though, gives us the budget to be able to get the equipment and technology we need to replace the damaged items. Library, they were able to be recipients of several grants this year. So that's new revenue. This allows them to be able to use those grant funds to put into their library program. Fleet, these items have come before council. The majority of this is related to vehicles that were ordered in 2023 but not received until 2024. I think the exception to that was the sweeper, because we had it in the 23 budget, but we weren't even able to order it. We were basically, the manufacturers were locking people out from being able to place orders. So we had to carry that into 24 to be able to place the order to purchase a new sweeper. The fire engine that came before council this year, we had it in the budget. We had it in the budget, I think, at just at 1.5 million or slightly under. And as council may recall from the approving of that RFP earlier this year, or I'm sorry, I think it was a sole source, that was a $1.6 million engine that we purchased this year and should have in about 3 years from now. And then the buses, those were fully funded through CARES dollars. They just came in over the amount that we had in the budget, but we were still able to get the full amount reimbursed through the CARES Act funding. Information systems and securities, they have within their budget reserves that they set aside for police. Police pays an additional each year in their IT rates to allow them to have the ability to replace equipment when it's needed for replacement. They do this with this server as well as their mobile data computers that are in their cars, because usually when we replace those, we replace the entire fleet of those computers. So this allows them to be able to build those reserves up, and then when they need to replace them, they have their own reserves to fund those through. The Motorola server, just for council's knowledge, that is what was formerly known as Spillman. It's their one of their main operating softwares that they use daily. Public transportation, this goes back to their route match software that they are purchasing, and then that came before council earlier this year. And then the community center bus pullout, the bus hub there, that's what that amendment's related to. And then the third item is a donation. They received a Ford Explorer through ITD. And again, just like the equipment we received through emergency management, we make an entry into our revenue and our expenses to have that donation on our books. And that's it for amendments.
Thank you, Director. Councilors, do you have any questions? Councilor Forsman?
Sorry, Spicklemeyer was raising his hand.
Councilor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you. So Director, back to the beginning on the reserve spending. So the $4 million United Airlines contract, which we don't know how much it's going to be, that's what's obligated. So what happens after we get the bill, if you will, and the remainder? Is there another amendment to correct this?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that.
Once we get the bill from United Airlines, hopefully it's not $4 million, is the remainder then, is there another amendment, or how do you deal with what's left?
So we amend the budget for the full potential liability of that contract. If we pay less than that, then that's just less reserves you had to use. So we don't have to go back and readjust the budget because we're spending under budget. This just gives you, it puts a full amount of that contract in your budget. So if all the bills added up to 4 million, you would have a $4 million impact on your reserves. If they added up to 2.5 million, then only 2.5 million comes out of your reserves to pay for the contract. But you don't have to go back and adjust the contract because it's under your budget.
Not adjust the contract, adjust our amendment.
Yeah, you don't have to adjust the amendment when you're going to spend less than budget.
Okay, maybe I need to see if there's anyone from the public that would like to testify on the amended budget. Councilors, do you have further questions? Not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay. I will close the public hearing. Thank you. Councilors, we'll now move to item F, first reading ordinance 4926, considering amending ordinance 4894, the annual appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2023 and ending September 30, 2024, appropriating additional monies that are to be received by the city of Lewiston, Idaho in the sum of $15,518,630. This is an action item. I would entertain a motion.
Mayor,
Councilor Schroeder,
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4926.
Second.
been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Council President Kleberg to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4926. Is there further discussion? Amendments? If not, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Clerk Rocky?
Approving the first reading of ordinance number 4926, an ordinance of the city of Lewiston amending ordinance number 4894, the annual appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2023 and ending September 30th, 2024, appropriating additional monies that are to be received by the city of Lewiston, Idaho in the sum of $15,518,630 and providing an effective date.
Thank you. Next, Councilor, we move to item G, public hearing, fiscal year 2025 budget, accepting testimony on the proposed budget for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024 and ending September 30th, 2025. This is an action item. We have our Finance Director, Ms. Amy Gordon, with us. Again, I will open the public hearing. There'll be a staff presentation. We'll accept any testimony from the public. Councilors, that will be your time to ask questions if you have any. Once the public hearing is closed, no additional evidence or testimony may be received. So with that, I will open the public hearing and turn the floor over to our Finance Director, Ms. Amy Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor. Amy Gordon, City Finance Director. So now we'll move on to the 2025 budget, which would be the budget commencing this coming October 1st, 2024, and would take us through September 30th of 2025. So I wanted to start by just touching on our fiduciary funds. We've talked about these briefly in some previous budget-related work sessions. These are two funds that are professionally managed by an independent financial advisor. These funds are self-sufficient, meaning they generate the revenue needed to pay the expenditures of the funds. I've included some citations to the city code that address the perpetual care fund. I did ask Clerk Brocky to add this presentation to the agenda packet so that you could go back and refer to these, or if you would like to have them as you work through the next couple of meetings, that information is available to you. I wanted to put some information though up on the perpetual care fund just because we recently talked about this in a work session. September 30th of 2023, the end of our last fiscal year, we had $956,000 in the perpetual care fund, just under $1 million. And at that time, there was only $182,000 of that was available to maintain the, to use towards maintenance of the city cemetery. Our last financial statement we received at September 30th, that had grown to be over 1.1 million. And then now we have 340,000 within that fund that can be used to support and maintain the cemetery. I mainly wanted to put that out there so you could see how drastically that can change in 9 months. And then I also need to remind council, it can also go the other way. If we're in a downturn in the market, we would potentially could have less funds available to us. So we try to be conservative in what we use each year to assist the cemetery in their maintenance and operations. The annual transfer that we have historically done the last handful of years has been 50,000. We've done as much as 120,000 in 1 year. And prior to 5 or 6 years ago, the annual amount was 25,000. But the last few years, we've been funding the cemetery 50,000 out of their perpetual care fund. Police retirement, I have also cited the sections of city code that address the police retirement fund. This is a retirement fund the benefactors of this are officers that were hired on or before July 1st, 1979. So we no longer have any active members of our police department that are members of this retirement fund. They're all retired at this point. The last actuary we had was in 2022. We'll have another one here in a few, as soon as the fiscal year ends, I'll initiate the next actuary study. Last time we had the actuary done, they had determined just slightly under 12 million was our fully funded amount. June 30th, we were at almost 14 million. We can't make any guarantees to you, but I think it's safe to hope that we will still be considered fully funded when we complete our actuary this year. The way we write this budget is this is a defined benefit plan, so we know what the expenses of the fund will be next year. We know the amount of the benefit payments. We always keep an amount in there that will cover operational costs such as the actuary study. So we just write what we need in our expense budget and then we construct the revenue to match that. So it's a balanced budget. If we come under revenue budgets for the year, that just means we'll dip into those reserves. If we earn more than what we need for expenses, we're building up those reserves. So I wanted to touch a little bit on finances process in the budget. So every year when we start working on the budget, we do a complete overhaul of the payroll budget. It's, as you know, one of our largest components of the budget. And so we go through and we completely reconstruct it based off our current population of employees that we're accounting for any turnover through retirements or other separations, that we're capturing, any changes from an employee going out at a high step and being the new employee being rehired at a lower step. We put in there any increases from cost of living. We calculate out what the increase would be for step increases in insurance. So we do a full rewrite of the payroll budget so that what's in the budget is really consistent to actual needs and that we're not just making arbitrary adjustments to a payroll budget. We go through and we update all of our internal service charges. So that means we have, within the general fund, we have a lot of functions such as finance, legal, legislative that provide services to the entire city, including enterprise funds. So there's an administration and admin internal service fee associated to those services. We go through and we update all of those items. We make any updates to the insurance costs based off what our brokers provide us for expected premium increases. We update depreciation. We review and update all the revenue we have available to us outside of property taxes. We review all the reserve balances of all the city funds, so we know how much in reserves we have available to support the budget. And then we determine what they then need to receive in property taxes to balance out those funds. And then from there, we can calculate property taxes that are needed to balance the budget. But the budget as it exists today. The programs, the services, what we have going on today. We don't make any budgetary decisions at the finance level. We're just taking what currently exists and applying the new costs and the calculations that are needed to update those to what the expected costs are for the upcoming year. Enterprise funds, that's our water fund, wastewater fund, stormwater fund, and sanitation fund. These are each their own individual fund that operate similar to a business, in which they are supported by user rates. The rates for these funds have already been set by council, but I wanted to put that information up here for the public's benefit so they can see that process. We did, earlier in May, we did a budget work session specifically on revenues that covered the rate studies related to these enterprise funds. Then the Public Works Director came and presented again the following week to give council an update of the planned projects in those funds. And then on June 24th, Director Johnson brought to council rate resolutions for the 4 enterprise funds, which were then approved and passed by council. And then I've listed the rate increases there to the side. Internal service funds. These are we have 3 of them: workers' compensation, fleet services, and information systems. I should say information systems and security, so I couldn't get it all in that square. These 3 funds provide services to the other funds of the city. So if you have within that fund employees or equipment, you're receiving a benefit from these 3 funds. Workers' compensation, this is our 3rd year of claims costs being more than what we're contributing to the fund. So one of the ways that we're addressing this is we did do a 10% premium increase in the annual funding amount. And then, which equates to $50,000, we contribute $500,000 annually into the workers' compensation fund. So in 2025, we're scheduling $550,000 into the workers' compensation fund. And then we have programmed to do an additional one-time funding from the general fund reserves. That potentially we could do that over 2 years to help replenish what we lost those first 2 years. Fleet services, I will say for both fleet and information systems and security, they have done a really good job the last 2 years of holding their rates and utilizing their reserves rather than doing rate increases to help us balance our budgets and without a property tax increase or as minimal of an impact on property taxes as possible. But this is just a year, which we can't continue to do that. We've got their reserves down to kind of the minimum threshold you want reserves to be. So we've got 2 years with minimal rate increases. This year, we just couldn't do that. Fleet services has an 8% increase in their operating rates. That equates out to approximately $75,000. Within that, does fund some additional budget for outside labor to allow us to use outside labor. You know, Fleet has the same number of employees that they have had during my time with the city. So they're very good at working within their operating budget, but we still have to account for pay increases for that staff as well as to fund that additional request for outside labor. There is a 12% increase in their capital rates. As council knows, we are just finding equipment and vehicles, more so equipment than vehicles, but they have gone up significantly higher than our what we had in our rates for projected inflation. The original rate increase that they had proposed was 20%. And they said, well, we could probably get by with 16%. We put 12% in there. And then we're proposing that council utilize reserves to do a cycle of one-time funding over a 2-year period. And then what that would do is it would escalate the funding for fleet And then ideally, we wouldn't have to raise those rates at all during the next 5 years, and then potentially even could stretch that longer. Information systems and securities, they have a 9% increase in capital. That's the equivalent to $10,000. They have a 16.5% increase in operating rates. But I do need to make that's really clear that 120,000 of that, so the bulk of that rate increase is related to the reassignment of an employee. So it's not necessarily that we didn't add a position, we just took a position that was originally housed within the police department, and it's now an employee of the Information Systems and Security Fund. That employee is still doing the same type of work because the predominant part of their job is to work on computer systems for the police department. But this just allows the IT department to be able to then cross-train with that employee to provide backup for when that employee is out of the office to ensure continuity of services. And then it allows the IT department to then utilize that employee elsewhere when they have a need for additional support on their side. So this was more an operational change. It just shifts the budget from the general fund to the IT fund. So during our last work session, we talked about some of the budget drivers that are really impacting this year or next year's budget compared to the last 2-year budget. The internal service rates, excluding the position that we talked about being reassigned and then those one-time funding opportunities, when we look at just the increased rates for the operational and the ongoing rates, that's a $300,000 impact to the budget. When we look at the increases that we're seeing in our insurance across the city, commercial and liability, as well as the payroll related ones, which means workers' compensation and health insurance, the overall impact to that to our budget was $429,000. Percy contributions, this was a big one. $461,000 is what the 25 Percy budget is compared to the 24 budget. We had a Percy rate contribution increase that went up just this July 1st, so just here recently. And the Percy board has proposed another rate increase next July. We don't know if it's will happen or not, but it's such a significant rate increase that we would be in trouble if we didn't factor that into our budget. So, maybe we'll get lucky and the board will pass a smaller rate, but we still have to build it into our budget so that we know that we have the resources for those rate increases. So I kind of wedged these items here in between our our enterprise funds and our governmental funds. All of these costs that we talked about in regards to the internal service funds, insurance, Percy, those will impact our enterprise funds and our governmental funds. So those amounts listed on the previous slides don't come solely from property taxes. Some of that increase is in the enterprise funds, but it does impact property taxes. So when we are building the budgets for our governmental funds, we work on those outside bubbles first. We go to cemetery, we construct their budget, and then we say, what do they have in reserves? How much of their reserves can they use to help fund this budget? And then that leaves us with what do they need in property taxes. And we work through that exercise with all of those 4 outlying governmental funds. And then we reserve the general fund to last. And they're the ones that either absorb the property tax increase or the decrease if there should be one. So we go through those funds and we look to see what they have available in any other revenues, as well as what they can utilize in their reserves. And then that will set what we program in there for property taxes. The capital fund, let me actually say the economic development fund, we don't currently put property taxes in there. We haven't for many years. There was a time in the past where they were a recipient for property taxes, but not in current or recent years. The capital fund, we don't, I think I might have got those out of order. Capital fund, we don't touch the property taxes there either. Those have been kind of designated by council in prior years. Last year, council had amended the budget to shift 1.65 million from general fund to capital transportation fund, specifically so they could address some arterial street reconstructions. So we leave those as is. We leave those as previously set by council in the prior year budget, and then council can direct us if they want us to adjust those. So this is what our property taxes look like for fiscal year 25. I do want to give council a little bit of information about that judgment levy. There, within your property tax value, you have residential, you have commercial, you also have utilities. So that would be railroads, Avista, CenturyLink, Lumen. Those values of those utilities are set by the state. And some of those utilities have, they've challenged what those values have been. And so the state has gone back through, reviewed those, and have determined that the value of those properties were too high. And so now they're saying we overassess the value, which means you collected too much in property tax dollars, and now we're asking that you repay those property tax dollars. So this isn't anything that the city did wrong. It's nothing that the county did wrong. This is the result of those utility value assessments being too high. And then we now repay property taxes collected on those values. The state allows cities to do a levy for that amount outside their other allowed levy rates. So council doesn't have to levy for this. You could utilize your reserves to pay it, but we did build it into the budget to levy those taxes under that allowed judgment levy rate that the state's granting us the ability to do. Doesn't mean that you have to levy for the taxes. You could repay those from your reserves, but that is an option that the state's allowing cities. So we built that into the proposed budget. So when we built our budget, incorporating all those things we'd previously talked about, just to balance the budget, we needed a 1.5% property tax increase. And then what I did, visiting with the mayor, we put the full 3%, the maximum amount that we're allowed to increase property taxes. We just went ahead and built the entire thing within the budget. Council doesn't have to pass a budget with a 3% property tax, but that's how we constructed the budget to give council the ability to fully consider some of the budget requests that were presented and requested by departments. So I kind of just layered these out, like what if you took a full 2% property tax increase, what are some of the items you could fund for with that additional tax increase? And then what would it look like if you did a 3% property tax increase? I will say this does not fund all the requests that departments made. Council's received those requests. They have that information. We went through and we marked if it was funded and included in the budget. We marked if it was not funded. So we just kind of layered this out in a priority we thought council might consider. There is one position included in this, so I want to make certain council's aware of that. That's in that third column over at the bottom where it's a transit driver. This position would allow transit to extend their fixed route, and the thought is it would reduce the number of dial-a-ride responses that they would be doing because they wouldn't be having to send dial-a-rides outside their existing route zones to bring those riders into the route. There were several requests that were made that were one-time funding in nature, so we programmed some additional requests in utilizing reserves, which we'll look at here in a few minutes. I do want council to get a look at what that looks like on the L2 form. So one of the things that we did is first we always try to capture new construction and any other new property tax payers to the budget. So we've put in the amount for new construction. The URA closed their East Main district this year. So that's the tax increment that the city would be entitled to from the district. And then, so those taxes were in the current year going directly to the URA. This is the amount of the taxes that would now come to the city directly. So they're already in the tax base, just they were going to the URA and would now come to the city directly. And then annexations. You'll see about middle of the road there, we've got that levy, judgment levy built in there. And then up above, we've computed in the 3% property tax increase, which is the 710,000. And then here's a look at the reserve balance, that's the unassigned general fund reserve balance that we will look to utilizing to help us fund one-time funding items. We don't like to use these for an item that would be ongoing or that we wouldn't have the ability to eliminate easily, because we want to make certain that there's an ongoing revenue source for an ongoing expense. So we look at using reserves to fund items that are one-time in nature. And if you see down the middle, we've noted any of the requests that we're utilizing reserves for. I do want to explain one item on here because I don't know, definitely not in a public meeting. We have not had the opportunity to discuss. There's a fire holiday pay contract adjustment, the third item up there of 100,000. We did through where we're currently at in our negotiations with the fire union, had asked to adjust how we're paying the holiday pay. We currently pay it in October, and that payment of October covers January through December. So we're paying all the holidays that occur January through September at the current pay rates with the new cost of living adjustment included in it. And then we're also paying for those 9 months worth of holidays in the next fiscal year. So I really wanted to correct that. We're paying holidays in the fiscal year that they occurred. But in order to make that correction, we're going to have to, in that first initial year, make 2 holiday pay adjustments. So we would pay in October, as we currently do, where they get all their holidays January through December. And then in September, we would pay for the January through September. And then going forward, it'd be October through September being paid in September. So it just aligns the holiday payment with the year that the holidays occurred. But in that first initial year, you need some additional budget to allow you to make that second payment. So that would be a one-time and programmed it in there to be paid from reserves. Down below, I did a calculation of the impact that the current year budget as amended has on our reserves in addition to the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. So we would still be sitting with over 90 days cash on hand, but we would be down close to 90 at 92 days. And then the item there in the middle where it says use of fund balance reserves restricted, those are funds that are only available to the police department to spend. It was through a private donor, and they had very specific items that those funds would be spent on. And that's all I have as far as the public hearing goes, and I will let you move on through the process.
Thank you. We'll see if there's anyone from the public that would like to offer a critique of our work. Welcome.
Thank you. Dale Aldridge, 2006 Cedar Avenue. I think most of my questions, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I think most of my questions were kind of answered there during the presentation. But the primary question that that I had after, by the way, this was great getting this in the mail, and I guess we get them every year, but for some reason this year I picked it up and studied it a little bit, so that brought up the questions. So you look at page 4 and 5, we have total revenues of 114,947,000 and some. And then if you look on page 5, it has expenditures equal to the same thing, or the same number. So my question was, the revenue included reserves of 17,305,000, and it doesn't, the publication doesn't tell you what how much is going back into reserves and what you end up at the end of the year. And there's a lot of talk in here about reserves, and I see now that it's projected that there'd be 92 days worth of cash. But I think you got to be real careful with that. My question centers around, what's the standard? Where do we really need to be to, when the auditors come in and do all that kind of stuff? And the other thing in the question kind of centers 24 into 25, is I was really interested on that decision to commit $4 million to the United Airlines contract. What kind of an impact did that have on our reserves? And if I read the chart right, we just committed a third of the accumulated reserves of the city on that contract. So I think that's something we got to watch really close. The other question I had on looking through the proposed 2025 expenditures, my question is how much for the airport? It's not at least in this publication, I couldn't find. There must be an ongoing contribution to the airport somewhere. And the people that I chat with around town or whatever, they all have the same question, how much is going to the airport? So I just think that needs to be delineated or whatever in the publication here. So I guess that's basically it. From my perspective, I guess the one unanswered question is there must be a standard somewhere. Is that 92 days better than the standard, or is it lower than the standard? And I just think we should be real careful with that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. You must have done this before, because that was 2 minutes and 58 seconds. You're very good. But anyone else from the public? We still have a couple of members of the public here. If not, I'm going to ask Director Gordon if you could just respond very briefly to Dale's comments. I think we have the answers there.
So the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers of Association, their recommendation on your reserve balance is at minimum a 60-day days cash on hand. But then that's their minimum requirement, and then they advise each government entity that they should then consider if they should have more than that. The city of Lewiston, we follow a 90-day for our best practice. One of the reasons we do that is our two largest sources of revenues for the general fund are property taxes and then our state shared revenues. Both of those items, state shared revenues, we receive those in January, and then also our property taxes in January as well. So that gives us that 90-day window to operate off our reserves until those two larger revenue items come into the city. And then I do want to add, for the public's benefit, we gave council a more expanded budget guide, which is also available to the public on the website. And it will break down the sources of revenue. So you'll be able to see the impact on reserves for each and every fund of the city in that guide.
And then also, Director Gordon, I believe there was a question about how much money we are giving to LWS in this year's budget.
Yes, so we, in the past, we have provided support for their operations and capital. So in the 2024 budget, we had provided them approximately $500,000, maybe $550,000 of support. They did not request any support in 2025. So there's no operating or capital support going to the airport in 2025.
And then just to respond to the 4 million, we're still working through that with United. But we have to budget for the full 4 and be prepared for that in case it doesn't come back in our favor. So thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing. Was there questions? I'll not close it if you have questions. Okay, I'm going to take that back. Councilor Spickman, sorry I didn't see folks.
Thank you, Mayor. Director, first off, outstanding job on this, your budget stuff, very good. And as the public comment too, one of my biggest concerns was that reserves and how fast it's depleted, in the last year and a half. It's a little alarming, but my question was on the breakdown of the property tax increases where it went from 1.5 and added the 0.45 and 1. Where you have the line separation, did the departments determine that by wants and needs or something? Like it showed here at 2%, there would be certain items included. If we went with an additional 1, it added on another 237,000.
So we don't allow departments to make increases to their budget. They have to submit a budget request form. And then we take those into consideration after we've constructed the budget for the already existing items. So the way that what we already have in play, the number of employees, the contracts, the equipment. Once we get the budget constructed and we see what we need or what we might need from property taxes to balance that budget or support that budget, then we go and we visit through the individual requests made by department. And then just through conversations with the mayor is how we ordered these in. So it's not necessarily, we just kind of put it in there based off their information that was on their budget request forms, some of the presentations that were done, what we felt council might be more inclined to prioritize or the others. We did it the way we thought might be the most acceptable to council, but you can easily move these items around too. This was just a way to layer these in to kind of give council an idea of what you could do with a tax increase or what you could choose not to do.
Okay, thank you.
So that's in council's.
Councilor Lidke?
I just want to clarify really for public and then just to make sure I'm reading this right, but to balance the budget with no additional asks of ongoing or capital, we would need a 1.55% increase to our base.
That's correct.
Councilor Lidke?
I have a follow-up because I've been watching the workman's comp situation for a while, and I know that we're self-funded, and I've read multiple articles, really for my own knowledge and benefit to try to figure out what the pros and cons are for self-funded. And I guess I'm just asking, and anybody can answer this question, but are we at a point that we need to reevaluate being self-funded, where we've had to get a little deeper into how we fund that, but also are there discussions amongst leadership on, I guess, who tracks like the trends? Are we seeing that policies need to change because we have unsafe behavior happening? Like what are we doing? Because to me, that's a controllable cost to a point through policy and through disciplinary action, because staff often get hurt at work doing something that they maybe shouldn't be doing. And so in my mind, that's controllable and something that we can look at to maybe for cost savings moving forward. Obviously, that's an internal discussion, but it would be nice to know what are we doing to try to bring those costs down.
So that, falls in the zone of the risk manager, but he does analyze the claims, what departments are occurring in, the type of claims. The mayor and I actually had a meeting with him today where we discussed, exposure and workers' compensation and where we have to be careful where we're extending risk for the city. The number of claims this year really hasn't been that bad. It's the claims from the previous year that are carrying into this year. Specifically, we have a pretty catastrophic claim that we're, as I mentioned earlier, we've hit that stop loss. So we'll hopefully feel an ease on our reserves at this point, hopefully. But even though we've had lower claims this year than in previous years, they're not the type of claims you want to see because several of them are resulting in surgeries. And then with a surgery, you have the employee out on leave for an extended period of time. So then you're covering that loss coverage on their compensation as well as overtime costs likely to backfill that position. So yeah, it's definitely a high priority concern for the risk manager that he's been working through.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a follow-up, so I can make sure I heard you right. Back to your budget drivers screen. Are those figures increases or totals for those increases? So that, in generality, that's the main driver in our budget then.
Yeah, if we didn't have all these things occurring in one year, we could have potentially balanced the budget, but to have the accumulation of all of these increased costs hit within this year, it was significant for us.
Because I definitely saw, looking in line items, there's not very much fluff in there as far as things we're purchasing or building and things like that, so.
Yeah, and I'll point out on the commercial and liability insurance, when our broker gave us the increase for 24, I think they had said plan for a 20% increase, which we did, and we saw more like a 35% increase. I don't think that all of the kind of known or projected cost of some of the liabilities we had against us last year were truly known at that time. So in our current year, we had to absorb a much larger increase than we had planned for. So some of this corrects that, as well as an additional increase that they're projecting for us this coming fiscal year as well.
Mayor,
Counselor Forsman?
excuse me, what are the shared costs with the employees and the employer for how much they pay for their insurance? So like how much do we pay and how much do the employees pay?
So the city covers 100% of the medical insurance for the employee and then 80% of benefit. Dependents. 80%. 80% dependent.
And sorry, follow up.
Counselor?
How long have we been providing the 100%? So you're saying 100% of their medical is paid for the employee and then 80% is paid for their dependents?
So the city pays 100% of the employee's premium, and they've been doing that longer than I've been here.
Okay.
And I'll remind council, I do believe, I think that they did adjust the dependent portion that the city paid several years ago, but that is in all your labor contracts. So to change that, you would have to open up each labor contract and renegotiate them.
Counselor Ledke?
For a comment to that, it's the same at the county as well. I believe they made some changes to match the city. I reviewed several of our municipalities, and that seems to be general practice. 100 for the employee and 80 for the dependent.
Thank you, councilors. If there's no more questions, I will close it. Up and down one more time. Okay, if not, I'm going to close the hearing, 7:54. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Councilors, we'll move to item H, first reading of ordinance 4923, to be termed the 2025 annual appropriation ordinance, considering appropriating sums of money authorized by law and necessary for all general and special municipal purposes of the city of Lewiston for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024 and ending September 30, 2025. This is an action item. Councilors?
Mayor,
Councilor Schroeder?
I move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4923.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Council President Kleberg to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4923. Is there discussion or amendments? Councilor Kleberg?
Just a comment for everybody that's here and people that are watching. This is the first reading. Get 2 more cracks at it.
Ready? Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Clerk Brocky?
Approving the first reading of ordinance 4923, an ordinance of the city of Lewiston to be termed the 2025 annual appropriation ordinance, appropriating sums of money authorized by law and deemed necessary for all general and special municipal purposes of the city of Lewiston, Idaho, for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024, and ending September 30, 2025, and providing an effective date.
Councilors, next up, we have item I, first reading ordinance 4924, considering fixing and establishing the tax certification on all taxable properties situated within the corporate limits of the city of Lewiston for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024, and ending September 30, 2025, for the purpose of providing and raising monies for municipal and corporate purposes, providing for the tax certification to the Board of County Commissioners of Nez Perce County, Idaho, in the amount of $24,524,120, providing a certified copy of the 2025 annual appropriation ordinance to the Board of County Commissioners of Nez Perce County, Idaho, as adopted by the city of Lewiston for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. This is an action item. Council?
Mayor,
Councilor Schroeder?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4924.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Schroeder, seconded by Councilor Speckelmeyer to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4924. Is there discussion? Council President Kleberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is assuming a 3% increase, correct?
One more time, Councilor.
This is assuming a 3% increase.
This is the certification for a 3% increase. That's correct.
Okay, just for explanation, I'll go ahead and vote for this, but keeping in mind that we can always reduce it. That would hopefully be my goal by the time we are done with the budget session in 2 weeks. But there's a few things I think are a little rich for my blood, and I guess that's why we have 3 readings of the budget. So, like I said, I'll go ahead and I'll vote for at this point in time.
Thank you, Councilor. Other comments? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Clerk Brocky?
Approving the first reading of ordinance number 4924, an ordinance of the city of Lewiston fixing and establishing the tax certification on all taxable properties situated within the corporate limits of the city of Lewiston for the fiscal year commencing October 1, 2024, and ending September 30, 2025, for the purpose of providing and raising monies for municipal and corporate purposes, providing for the tax certification to the Board of County Commissioners of Nez Perce County, Idaho, in the amount of $24,524,120, providing a certified copy of the 2025 annual appropriation ordinance to the Board of County Commissioners of Nez Perce County, Idaho, as adopted by the city of Lewiston for the 2024-2025 fiscal year, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Clerk Brocky. Councilors, next we move to Roman numeral 6, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine by the council when and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these issues unless the councilor so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered on the active agenda under items moved from the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor Schroeder, second by Councilor Speckelmeyer to approve the consent agenda. Clerk Rocky?
Council President Kleberg,
Aye.
Councilor Schroeder,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Lidke,
Aye.
Councilor Klein,
Aye.
Councilor Spiegelmeier.
Aye. Thank you, council. We'll jump over Roman numeral 7 and go to Roman numeral 8, unfinished and new business. Item A, city councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the city council or an item that may come before the city council in the foreseeable future and shall be limited to comments, not discussion. We have councilor comments. Council President Kleberg.
Just a brief one. I'd like to thank Director Gordon for a little bit long, but a very well-planned presentation. And thought she did a great job on presenting us with the budget and the numbers.
Mayor.
Councilor Forsman.
Sometimes I ask questions just to make sure I understand all of the aspects, and sometimes it doesn't mean anything by it, or I make plans on it. I'm just making sure that I am understanding the full scope of the decision I am making in order to make the best one. And so just wanted some people to know that. That sometimes can all be it. It's not maybe that I have an agenda or anything, but just figuring out all the avenues that we could take as a city and as counselors to make the best decision for the taxpayer and the people that we pay and that provide us services.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Lidke.
Thanks, Mayor. Just real quick, I'm going to take the opportunity to invite everyone to Business After Hours this coming Thursday, August 15th from 5 to 7 at Opportunities Unlimited down on Snake River Avenue. We are celebrating 50 years of serving people with disabilities. And to that, I'd also like to just give a quick shout out to our eldest employee, John Fellhaber, former Marine, and who recently took himself to the ER at 2 a.m. to find out that he had had a cardiac event that landed him in Kootenai for a triple bypass, and he rocked it, and I was able to visit with him today in person, and he's doing quite well. But we're just very thankful for all our staff, but especially the ones that have served our country. So I just want to give him a quick shout out.
Thank you, Councilor. Okay, I'm going to jump to item B, city boards and commission liaison updates. I'll just go through this real quickly. If you have a comment to share with us, please do so. We are going to spend some more time on this in the upcoming time that we have together to talk about some potential changes. Cemetery and urban forestry, Councilor Speckelmeyer, anything to share? Or Councilor Klein has it, I guess now, huh? Anything new to share with us?
Nothing new.
Okay, Code Board of Appeals, we never have one of those, but we should. Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee, Councilor Lidke, and Disability Advisory, both.
Right now, they're in the Disability Advisory Commission. They're discussing the our ADA plan, and was very pleased to hear them basically push city staff to improve on that and expand beyond public works, because disabilities goes beyond physical limitations. So I'm sure the city staff will be discussing that. And then as far as our development impact has been pushed out due to, I believe, our consultants aren't available until time later this month or next. So we haven't had a meeting.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Forsman, EMS or Historic Preservation?
I don't have anything on EMS, but historic preservation, they are working on getting more Facebook popular, if you want to say, and have their information on Facebook and more events be advertised so the public can see them if they're not there in person. Finding ways to advocate for the QR codes that they put throughout the Main Street area to get citizens to partake. So really just trying to get a louder voice as a commission so that the citizens get more excited about historic preservation.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Kleberg, Library.
Library, next meeting is a week from Wednesday.
Thank you. Counselor Spickelmeyer, Parks and Rec, an update for us? Anything?
Yeah, the commission completed that, the Burt Lips survey last week. I believe it was already publicized in the Tribune. But we're going to be on the agenda, I believe, shooting for the 26th, for the director and I will be making a presentation and looking for some direction on moving forward on what we want to do at the pool.
Thank you, Counselor. And Counselor Schroeder, Public Works Advisory, anything to share with us on that?
No, it's coming up, but I do have the MPO. We had a presentation of the draft on the Thane Road corridor, and they had been doing public engagements in 23 and 24 at the Fair Building and et cetera. And that is on the Thane and 10th is the main priority, the top priority, but they've also identified other areas. And also, we have the long-range plan transportation, long-range planning transportation plan scope of work. And that isn't due until October of 25, but they are going out again with public outreach, and they will be at the fair and other places too, getting people's opinions. So they've been those were very interesting to sit through.
Thank you, Counselor. Next, we'll move to mayor comments. I got three quick ones. Counselors, I may ask to put together a special meeting the first week of September since we're going to miss out on our work session. So that means another meeting for us, but I'll work with Clerk Brocky and send some information out to you, see if we can get at least 4 of you there so we can keep getting some things knocked off the calendar because they don't go away when we don't meet. So I'll let you know about that. We heard about fishing dams today, if you're interested in that. I have to tell you, I went over to the bus stop the other day, and there's a young man sitting out there waiting for the bus. And on the back of his shirt, it says, "In a world of fries, be the curly one." So that kind of made me smile for the day. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to be the curly one once in a while. So whatever that means. But maybe probably what it means is to be a little bit different. But I thought it was funny. Yeah, it's good. Be the curly one. So, Councilor Lickey, you can laugh if you want. Okay, next we're going to go to item D, Advisory Board and Commission appointments, action items. Number 1, Public Works Advisory Commission, considering appointing Latonia Gardy to a 3-year term. I move to approve the appointment of Latonia Gardy to a 3-year term on the Public Works Advisory Commission.
Second.
Who's the second? Okay, it's moved by Mayor Johnson, second by Councilor Schroeder to approve the appointment of Latonia Gardy to a 3-year term on the Public Works Advisory Commission. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Item D2, Disability Advisory Commission, considering the appointment of Michael Feeney to a 3-year term. I move to approve the appointment of Michael Feeney to a 3-year term on the Disability Advisory Commission.
Second.
It's been moved by Mayor Johnson, second by Council President Kleberg to approve the appointment of Michael Feeney to a 3-year term on the Disability Advisory Commission. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, councilors. That brings us to item 8E, agenda topics. Hearing none, we'll go to Roman number 9, adjournment.
Mayor,
Councilor Litkey.
move to adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Litkey, second by Council President Kleberg to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. Thank you.